The massive space station called Nexus Prime hung in the darkness like a glowing jewel. It was bigger than most moons, and had been built by dozens of alien races working together. Today, it would decide if humans could stay in the galaxy or be sent back to their home world forever. Commander Jake Harrison walked down the long metal hallway toward the main meeting room. His boots made sharp sounds on the floor with each step. Behind him, Dr. Lisa Morgan carried a data pad filled with everything good that humans had done since joining the galactic community. Neither of them believed it would matter. The meeting room was enormous. It stretched up so high that Jake could barely see the ceiling. Hundreds of different alien beings sat in curved rows that went around in a circle. Some looked almost human, but had blue skin or extra arms. Others were so strange that Jake still felt surprised when he saw them, even after 3 years of working with alien races. In the center of the room stood a raised platform where Jake would have to speak. Around the platform, the alien representatives whispered to each other in dozens of different languages. Their voices mixed together into a low humming sound that filled the air. The Zephyrians sat in the front row. They looked like tall humans made of living crystal, and light moved through their bodies when they talked. Their leader, Vextar, had been the first to call for this vote. Next to them sat the creatures from the Hive Mind Confederation. They looked like giant insects but moved with perfect coordination, as if they shared one brain between all of them. Jake had spent months preparing for this day, but he knew the outcome was already decided. The aliens had made up their minds about humans before the meeting even started. They were scared of what humans might become, and fear always won over hope in politics. Dr. Morgan touched his arm. "Remember what we practiced," she said quietly. "Stay calm no matter what they say." The ancient being called Zix Thara floated above the center of the platform. It looked like a ball of golden light with no solid body, and it was older than human civilization. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once. "The Galactic Council will now hear the charges against the human species," Zix Thara announced. The room became completely silent. Vextar stood up, and light pulsed through his crystal body. "Humans are too violent," he said. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a storm. In just 50 years, they fought 3 major wars on their home planet. They build weapons before they build schools. They solve problems by breaking things. Jake wanted to argue, but he had to wait his turn to speak. Humans had fought wars, but they had also created art, music, and literature. They had sent aid to alien worlds hit by disasters. They had shared their medical knowledge freely with species that needed it. The representative from the crystalline collective spoke next. She was a tall, thin creature made of what looked like living glass. "Humans advance too quickly in technology," she said, in a voice like breaking ice. "In 10 years, they went from basic space flight to building ships that rival our best designs. They learn our secrets and then improve on them. This rate of growth is dangerous to galactic stability." More aliens stood up to speak against humans. The ethereal minds complained that humans could not be read telepathically and therefore could not be trusted. The banking consortium said that human trade practices were too aggressive and disrupted established markets. The Peaceful Alliance argued that humans asked too many questions and did not accept authority well enough. Each complaint built on the last one. Humans were too curious, too independent, too willing to take risks. They did not fit into the careful balance that had kept the galaxy peaceful for thousands of years. Finally, Zix Thara called Jake to speak. He walked to the center of the platform and looked up at hundreds of alien faces staring down at him. Some looked sad, others angry, but most looked afraid. "Honored representatives," Jake began, "everything you have said about humans is true. We are violent sometimes. We do advance quickly in technology. We ask difficult questions, and we do not always follow rules that do not make sense to us." The room stirred with surprise. They had expected him to deny the charges. "But these same qualities that you fear have also brought good things to the galaxy," Jake continued. "When the plague hit the Andromedan colonies, human doctors worked without sleep for weeks to find a cure. When the star pirates attacked the trade routes near Vega, human ships fought beside yours to drive them away. When the children of Kepler Prime needed new schools, Human engineers built them for free. Jake's voice grew stronger. You judge us for our wars, but you forget that we also make peace. You fear our technology, but you use our innovations in your own ships. You say we do not follow your rules, but maybe your rules need to be questioned. The room filled with angry voices. Several representatives stood up and shouted in languages Jake did not understand. Zixthera had to call for order multiple times. When the noise died down, Zixthera announced that the vote would begin. One by one, the species cast their decision. The Altarians voted to exile humans. The Betelgeuse Federation voted the same way. The Centauri Republic followed. Jake watched the numbers appear on the big screen above the platform. Each vote felt like a punch to his chest. Dr. Morgan stood beside him, writing down everything that was happening, but her hands were shaking. The final count appeared in glowing numbers that everyone could see. 287 species voted to exile humans from galactic space. 12 abstained from voting. Only 3 voted against the exile. Zixthera's voice filled the chamber one last time. The decision is made. Humanity has 30 standard days to remove all personnel, ships, and installations from galactic space. After that time, any human presence outside the Sol system will be considered an act of war. Jake felt something cold settle in his stomach, but it was not fear. It was something much more dangerous. As he walked out of the chamber with Dr. Morgan, he was already thinking about what would happen next. The galaxy had just made the biggest mistake in its long history. They thought they were getting rid of a problem, but they were actually creating one. Humans did not give up when things got hard. They got angry, and they got even. The vote was finished, but the real story was just beginning. Captain Ben Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the UES Liberty and watched the evacuation report scroll across his screen. Every human outpost, every research station, every diplomatic building across 50 star systems had to be emptied in 30 days. It was the largest movement of people in human history, and he was in charge of making it happen. The hardest part was not the logistics. Humans were good at moving fast when they had to. The hardest part was watching his people's faces as they packed up their lives and dreams. 3 years of building relationships with alien species gone. Decades of scientific research abandoned. Children who had been born on distant worlds, forced to leave the only homes they had ever known. But Rodriguez was not just any captain. He had fought in the border wars before first contact, and he knew something that the aliens did not understand. Humans were at their most dangerous when they had nothing left to lose. On the mining world of Kepler 438c, engineer Amy Collins supervised the shutdown of the largest rare mineral extraction facility in the galaxy. The operation had taken 2 years to build and employed over 3,000 people. Now it would be left to rust. Collins walked through the massive processing plant one last time. The machines that separated exotic elements from raw ore hummed quietly in the background. These elements were used in everything from faster-than-light engines to advanced medical equipment. Without human mining operations, the galaxy would face shortages within months. She stopped at the main control panel and looked at the shutdown sequence on her screen. All she had to do was press one button and the entire facility would power down safely. But Collins had a different idea. Instead of shutting down the equipment properly, she made small changes to the control systems. Nothing that would hurt anyone, but enough to make sure the facility could never run again without human expertise. She also did something else. Deep in the computer files, she left detailed records of every mining technique, every efficiency improvement, and every safety protocol that humans had developed. If the galaxy wanted to keep humans out, they would have to figure out how to replace human innovation on their own. Admiral Pete Thompson commanded the withdrawal of Earth's deep space fleet from his flagship, the UES Vengeance. On paper, he was conducting an orderly retreat. In reality, he was running the most comprehensive intelligence-gathering operation in human history. Thompson had been planning for this possibility since the day humans joined the galactic community. He knew that peaceful cooperation could end at any time, and he had prepared accordingly. As his ships moved through galactic space for the last time, they were not just leaving. They were learning. Every sensor on every human ship was recording. Everything. Shipping routes, defense platforms, communication networks, and military installations were all being mapped and analyzed. The locations of important government buildings, the schedules of patrol fleets, and the weak points in planetary defenses were noted and filed away. Commander Lisa Walsh piloted her reconnaissance ship through the outer edge of Zephyrian space. Her orders were simple. Get close enough to their military bases to gather detailed scans, but not close enough to trigger their defense systems. It was dangerous work, but Walsh was one of the best pilots in the human fleet. As she flew past a massive Zephyrian battle station, her ship's computers recorded everything: the weapon placements, the shield generators, the docking bays, and, most importantly, the energy signatures that would tell human weapons exactly where to aim when the time came. Walsh smiled as she watched the data stream into her ship's memory banks. The Zephyrians thought they were watching a defeated enemy retreat. They had no idea they were showing their secrets to future conquerors. Dr. Rachel Barnes worked frantically in her laboratory aboard the research vessel HFY Discovery. As the head of xenotechnology research, she had access to samples and data from every alien species humans had encountered. All of it had to be evacuated back to Earth. But Barnes was doing more than just packing. She was looking for weaknesses. Every species had biological quirks that could be exploited. The Zephyrians were made of living crystal, which meant they could be shattered with the right frequency of sound. The hive-mind creatures shared thoughts through electromagnetic fields, which could be disrupted with targeted interference. The energy beings like Zixthara could be trapped in specially designed containment fields. Barnes had been studying these weaknesses for years, just in case diplomacy failed. Now she was glad she had been so thorough. Her research would become the foundation for weapons that could hurt species the galaxy thought were invulnerable. As the evacuation continued, other humans were making their own preparations. Captain Gary Foster, commanding the transport ship UES Horizon, was not just moving human civilians back to Earth. He was also quietly recruiting aliens who had opposed the exile vote. There were not many, but they existed. Scientists who valued human innovation, traders who profited from human commerce, and a few idealists who believed the galaxy was making a mistake. Foster offered them passage to Earth, where they would be treated as honored guests rather than enemies. The galaxy thought they were purging themselves of human influence, but they were actually giving away some of their best minds to their future enemy. On the outer edge of galactic space, Captain Ryan Walsh commanded the last human ship to cross the quarantine boundary. The science vessel UES Pioneer was officially the final ship in the evacuation convoy, but Walsh had one more job to do. As his ship crossed into the empty space between the galaxy and Earth's solar system, Walsh activated a secret cargo bay. Inside were dozens of small monitoring devices, each one no bigger than a baseball but packed with advanced sensors and communication equipment. The devices scattered into space and activated their stealth systems. They would drift along the quarantine boundary, invisible to alien sensors but always watching. Every ship that crossed the line, every patrol that checked the border, and every communication between galactic governments would be recorded and transmitted back to Earth. Walsh watched the devices disappear into the darkness and felt a grim satisfaction. The galaxy had built a prison around Earth, but they had also given humans the motivation to break free. And when they did, humanity would know exactly where to strike. As the UES Pioneer made its final jump toward home, Walsh thought about what would happen next. The galaxy believed they had solved their human problem by locking them away in one star system. They were about to learn that caging a predator only made it hungrier. The evacuation was complete, but the real work was just beginning. 5 years had passed since the galaxy threw humanity out of their space. The Sol system looked nothing like it had before the exile. Where once there had been a few space stations and mining operations, now there were massive military installations, floating between the planets like metal cities. General Kate Phillips stood in the command center of Fortress Luna, the largest military base ever built by humans. Through the reinforced windows, she could see construction ships welding new gun platforms to the moon's surface. Every day brought new weapons, new ships, and new soldiers trained for war. The exile had changed humanity in ways the galaxy could never have imagined. Cut off from alien trade, humans had been forced to build everything themselves. The result was technology that surpassed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Dr. Steve Martinez walked through his laboratory in the heart of Mars Station Alpha. The Prometheus Research Initiative had achieved breakthroughs that should have taken centuries, fusion reactors that could power entire worlds, computer systems that thought faster than any alien artificial intelligence, and most importantly, a new type of faster-than-light drive that did not need the galaxy's jump-gate network. Martinez stopped at a workbench where his team was assembling the latest prototype. The device was smaller than a briefcase but could propel a ship across the galaxy in hours instead of weeks. Unlike alien technology, it worked by bending space itself rather than moving through it. "How many more can we build this month?" Martinez asked his assistant. 50 units, came the reply. Enough to outfit the entire Fifth Fleet. Martinez smiled. The galaxy had forced humans to innovate, and innovation was what humans did best. Every challenge had become an opportunity to build something better, faster, and more deadly than what came before. Commander Julia Roberts supervised the mining operations in the asteroid belt from her command ship, the UES Harvester. What had once been scattered rocks floating in space was now an industrial complex that processed more raw materials than entire galactic sectors. Massive mining ships carved up asteroids and fed the debris into processing stations that worked around the clock. The rare elements that humans had once bought from alien traders were now produced in quantities that would make galactic economists weep. Every scrap of metal, every trace of exotic matter in the Sol system had been claimed and put to use. Roberts watched as a new shipyard came online near Ceres. It was the 15th facility dedicated to building warships, and it would not be the last. The galaxy had cut off human access to their technology, so humans had built their own. The results were ships that were faster, tougher, and more heavily armed than anything in galactic space. But the most shocking development came from an unexpected source. Dr. Andy Parker had been studying the biological samples collected during humanity's brief time in galactic society. His discovery would change everything humans thought they knew about themselves. Parker worked in a laboratory deep beneath Earth's surface, surrounded by genetic sequencing equipment and biological samples from dozens of alien species. What he had found was impossible according to galactic science, but the evidence was undeniable. Humans were not just another species that had evolved on one world. They were something unique in the galaxy. Their genetic code had a flexibility that allowed them to adapt to conditions that would kill other species within generations instead of millennia. Parker had tested his theory with volunteers from the military. Soldiers exposed to the methane atmosphere of Titan developed the ability to process the toxic gas within months. Engineers working in the radiation fields around Jupiter grew natural resistance to energy that would cook most aliens alive. Pilots, training in zero gravity for extended periods, developed enhanced reflexes and spatial awareness that surpassed any known species. "We are not just human anymore," Parker told General Phillips during his briefing. "We are becoming something new, something the galaxy has never seen." In the deepest military installations on Earth, Colonel Nancy Wright oversaw Project Nemesis. Her team had spent 5 years developing weapons specifically designed to kill alien species. Each weapon exploited biological weaknesses that humans had discovered during their time in galactic society. Sonic disruptors that could shatter Zephyrian crystal bodies. Electromagnetic pulse weapons that would disconnect hive-mind creatures from their shared consciousness. Energy-dampening fields that could trap beings like Zixthera in physical form where they could be destroyed. Wright tested each weapon personally, making sure they worked exactly as designed. The galaxy had rejected humanity based on fear of what they might become. Those fears were about to become reality. Reports from the monitoring stations along the quarantine boundary painted a picture of a galaxy that had grown soft in humanity's absence. Trade disputes between species had escalated into minor conflicts. The technological stagnation that came from rejecting human innovation was beginning to show. Most importantly, several species were starting to question whether the exile had been the right decision. Captain Eric Johnson of the Galactic Patrol had sent 3 reports requesting permission to establish contact with human authorities. His superiors had denied each request, but Johnson's messages showed that some aliens were beginning to realize their mistake. It was too late for second thoughts. Humanity had spent 5 years preparing for war, and they had become something the galaxy could not imagine. They were no longer the species that had been voted out of galactic society. They were predators, and they were ready to hunt. Admiral Susan Clark received her orders from Earth Command as she stood on the bridge of the UES Retribution. The ship was a masterpiece of human engineering, bristling with weapons that could crack planets and powered by fusion reactors that burned hotter than stars. Her mission was simple: return to galactic space and test their defenses. Not as diplomats, seeking readmission, but as conquerors measuring their prey. As the Retribution and her escort fleet powered up their new faster-than-light drives, Clark thought about how much had changed. 5 years ago, humans had been begging for acceptance in galactic society. Now they were coming back to take it over. The galaxy had voted against Earth because they feared human potential. They were about to discover that their fears had not been strong enough. The first sign that something had changed came from the Outer Rim trading posts. Ships began disappearing along the routes closest to human space. At first, the Galactic Patrol blamed pirates or equipment failures. Space was dangerous and vessels were lost all the time. Captain Eric Johnson of the patrol ship GS Vigilant investigated the 3rd missing convoy near the Vega system. What he found made no sense according to everything he knew about space combat. The cargo ships were intact but empty, floating dead in space with their crews gone and their holds stripped clean. Johnson studied the sensor readings on his bridge display. The attack patterns were surgical, precise, and completely silent. No distress calls had been sent. No weapons fire had been detected. The ships had simply been boarded, emptied, and abandoned. "Sir," his communications officer reported, "I am picking up energy signatures that do not match any known galactic technology." Johnson felt ice form in his stomach. There was only one explanation, but it was impossible. Humans had been locked away in their home system for 5 years. Their primitive ships could never have reached this far into galactic space. Then his sensors detected movement. Ships were approaching from the asteroid field, but they moved wrong. Too fast, too quiet, and without the energy signatures of standard faster-than-light drives. As they came closer, Johnson could see that they were human in design, but changed, in ways that hurt to look at. "Unknown vessels," Johnson broadcast on all frequencies. "Identify yourselves and state your intentions." The response came in perfect galactic standard, but with a human accent that carried death in every word. "Galactic Patrol vessel, you are trespassing in territory claimed by the Terran Republic. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Johnson's hands shook as he reached for the emergency transmitter. The humans were back, and they were nothing like the species that had been voted out of the galaxy 5 years ago. Admiral Susan Clark watched the patrol ship retreat from the bridge of the UES Retribution. The vessel was impressive by human standards from 5 years ago, but compared to what humanity had built during their exile, it was a toy. "Target is withdrawing, Admiral," reported her tactical officer. "Should we pursue?" "No," Clark replied. "Let them run. We want the galaxy to know we are coming." Clark had been given command of the first human fleet to leave Sol system since the quarantine began. Her orders were to test galactic defenses, gather intelligence, and establish forward bases. What she had discovered exceeded even the most optimistic predictions from Earth Command. The galaxy had grown weak during humanity's absence. Military readiness had declined as species focused on peaceful trade and cultural exchange. Defense platforms were undermanned, patrol schedules were predictable, and most importantly, the different species were no longer working together effectively. Dr. Gary White, serving as the fleet's science officer, analyzed intercepted communications from his station aboard the Retribution. The reports painted a picture of a galactic community in decline. The Zephyrian Empire was dealing with internal rebellions as their crystal-based society fractured along ideological lines. The crystalline collective was experiencing computational errors that threatened their shared consciousness. The hive mind. Confederation had split into competing subminds that fought each other more than they cooperated. Admiral, White reported, the galaxy is not the unified force that voted us out 5 years ago. They are divided, weakened, and unprepared for what we have become. Clark nodded as she studied the tactical displays showing human forces moving through galactic space. Her ships were not the desperate vessels that had limped back to Earth during the evacuation. These were predators, built for war and crewed by humans who had spent 5 years preparing for this moment. Lieutenant Colonel Maria Green led the first human ground operation on an alien world since the exile. Her target was a supply depot on the mining world of Kepler 186F, chosen specifically because it was defended by multiple species working together. Green's soldiers moved through the facility like ghosts. Their new armor made them nearly invisible to alien sensors, and their weapons were designed to exploit the specific weaknesses of each species they encountered. Zephyrian guards fell to sonic disruptors that shattered their crystal bodies. Hive mind soldiers collapsed when electromagnetic pulses severed their connection to the collective consciousness. The operation took less than an hour. When it was over, the depot belonged to humanity, and Green's forces had captured enough supplies to outfit an entire division. More importantly, they had taken prisoners who could provide intelligence about galactic military capabilities. "Base, this is Green," she reported to her command ship. "Objective secured, no human casualties. Recommend we begin Phase 2 operations immediately." The response came from Admiral Clark herself. "Understood, Colonel. Well done. Begin establishing permanent installations. We are not leaving this time." As human forces spread through the outer systems, the galactic powers finally began to understand what they were facing. This was not the same species that had been voted out of their space 5 years ago. These humans moved with the confidence of apex predators, and they had technology that should not have been possible to develop in such a short time. Captain Johnson's report reached the Galactic Council 3 days after his encounter with the human fleet. The emergency session was called immediately, but the debate was chaotic and unproductive. Some representatives wanted to negotiate, others demanded immediate military action, and a few suggested that the quarantine had been a mistake from the beginning. Zixithara, the ancient energy being who had overseen the original vote, floated above the assembly in obvious distress. "The humans have returned, but they are not the same species we exiled. They have become something new, something dangerous." The Zephyrian representative, Vextar, pulsed with angry light. "Impossible. No species can evolve that quickly. It has only been 5 years. Evolution is not always biological," replied the delegate from the ethereal minds. "They have evolved socially, technologically, and psychologically. We forced them to adapt or die, and they chose adaptation." As the debate continued, more reports arrived from across galactic space. Human ships were appearing everywhere, not in the small numbers from their original presence, but in fleets that numbered in the hundreds. They were not exploring or trading. They were conquering. The most disturbing reports came from species that had voted most strongly for the human exile. Zephyrian colonies were being systematically occupied. Hive mind installations were being destroyed with weapons that seemed designed specifically to hurt their unique biology. Even the energy-based beings like Zixithara were finding themselves vulnerable to new human technologies. Admiral Clark received her final orders from Earth as she prepared for the next phase of operations. The message was simple and terrifying in its implications. "Admiral Clark, you are hereby authorized to begin Operation Reckoning. Humanity is no longer seeking readmission to galactic society. We are claiming dominion over it. Make them understand that the vote against Earth was not just a mistake. It was a declaration of war that took us 5 years to answer." As human fleets moved deeper into galactic space, the truth became clear to every species that had participated in the original vote. They had not exiled a threat. They had created one, and now that threat was coming home to collect what it was owed. The galaxy had voted against Earth, believing they were preserving their peaceful way of life. Instead, they had guaranteed that peace would only exist under human rule. The Galactic Council met in emergency session for the 7th time in 2 weeks. The great chamber that had once been filled with confident representatives now held beings who jumped at every shadow. Reports flooded in faster than they could be processed, each one worse than the last. Human forces were not just raiding supply lines anymore. They were dismantling the infrastructure that held galactic civilization together. The ancient jump gate network that connected thousands of worlds was under systematic attack. Trade routes that had operated safely for millennia were now hunting grounds for human predators. Zixthera floated above the assembly, its golden light flickering with what could only be described as fear. The ancient being had lived through the rise and fall of dozens of civilizations, but it had never seen anything like this. The humans are not seeking to rejoin our society, Zixthera announced to the chamber. They are replacing it with their own. Commander Dan Torres led the assault on the primary jump gate nexus at Vega Station. The massive structure was the size of a small moon and had been built over centuries by dozens of species working together. It was supposed to be the most heavily defended installation in galactic space. Torres watched from the bridge of his battleship as human forces tore through the station's defenses like they were made of paper. The defenders fought bravely, but they were using tactics and technology that were already obsolete. Human ships moved through space like sharks through water, striking exactly where their enemies were weakest. All defensive platforms destroyed, reported his tactical officer. The station is ours, sir. Torres nodded as he studied the strategic display. Taking the Nexus would cut off faster than light travel between the core worlds and the outer rim territories. Half the galaxy would be isolated from the other half, making coordinated resistance impossible. But more than that, controlling the jump gates meant controlling trade, communication, and military movement throughout galactic space. With this single victory, humanity had effectively conquered the galaxy without firing a shot at most of its worlds. General Laura Martin commanded human ground forces as they established control over key worlds throughout galactic space. Her troops were not the desperate soldiers who had retreated from these same planets 5 years ago. They were hardened veterans who had trained specifically for this war. On the crystal world of Zephyr Prime, Martin's forces used sonic weapons to shatter the living cities where the crystal beings lived. The attacks were surgical and precise, targeting only military installations and government buildings while leaving civilian areas intact. The message was clear: surrender or watch your civilization crumble. The Zephyrian defenders could not understand how humans had learned to fight them so effectively. Every tactic they tried was countered. Every weakness they thought was secret was exploited. It was as if the humans had been studying them for years, preparing for this exact moment. Martin stood in the ruins of the Zephyrian Military Command Center as the planet's leaders were brought before her. Their crystal bodies pulsed with dim light, a sign of defeat and despair among their kind. Your world belongs to humanity now, Martin told them in their own language. You can choose to cooperate and keep your people safe, or you can resist and watch them die. The choice is yours. The most shocking revelation came when humanity demonstrated their ultimate capability. Dr. Carlos Robinson, working from the research Fessel UES evolution, had perfected the genetic modifications that allowed humans to survive in conditions that would kill other species. Robinson had volunteers living permanently in the methane storms of gas giant atmospheres, working in the radiation fields around neutron stars, and building installations in the vacuum of space without protective suits. Everywhere the galaxy considered uninhabitable, humanity had learned to call home. This meant that human forces could operate in environments where no other species could follow. They could build bases in asteroid fields, establish colonies in toxic atmospheres, and hide fleets in radiation zones that would cook alien ships in minutes. The galaxy finally understood that they were not just facing a military conquest. They were facing a species that could live anywhere, fight anyone, and adapt to any challenge. Humans had become the ultimate survivors, and survival meant dominance. But the final blow came from an unexpected source. Ambassador Helen Ross hijacked the Galactic Communication Network and broadcast a message to every world in known space. Her words were calm, reasonable, and absolutely terrifying. "People of the galaxy," Ross began, "5 years ago you voted to exile humanity because you feared what we might become. Your fear was justified, but your solution was wrong. You cannot contain evolution. You can only delay it." Ross paused as images of human victories played across screens throughout galactic space. Ships burning, worlds surrendering, and ancient civilizations bowing before human authority. "We are no longer the species you rejected," she continued. "We are what you made us, and we are what you will become. The galaxy has a choice now. You can accept human leadership and prosper under our protection, or you can resist and be swept aside by forces you cannot comprehend." The message that followed was simple but absolute. Humanity was establishing the Terran Empire, with Earth as its capital and humans as its ruling species. All existing governments were dissolved. All military forces were disbanded. All species would now exist under human authority. Those who cooperated would be treated fairly and allowed to maintain their cultures and traditions. Those who resisted would be eliminated without mercy. There would be no negotiation, no compromise, and no second chances. As human fleets took position around major galactic worlds and occupation governments were established, the transformation was complete. The species that had been voted out of galactic society for being too dangerous had returned to prove that the galaxy's fears were not strong enough. The vote against Earth had been meant to preserve galactic civilization. Instead, it had ensured that civilization would exist only on human terms. The weak and divided galaxy that had rejected humanity now found itself under the rule of predators who had been forged by rejection into the ultimate conquerors. Commander Jake Harrison, who had stood alone before the Galactic Council 5 years ago, now sat in the governor's chair on the capital world of the former Galactic Council. The same chamber where he had been humiliated now served as the throne room of human authority. When the last representatives of the old galactic order were brought before him, Harrison's words were simple and final. "You voted against Earth because you thought we were dangerous. You were right, but you made one mistake. You thought exile would make us weaker. Instead, it made us everything you feared we could become. And now, that fear is your reality." The Kier galaxy had voted against Earth, and in doing so, they had voted for their own conquest. The age of galactic democracy was over. The age of human empire had begun.